Welcome to the media, welcome to the public who will be watching. I can't see a live stream, but it's on, thank you. And a reminder to turn off your mobile phones. Television did ask for permission, and kei te pai. So I will begin by asking Councillor Donaldson, please, to open with our council prayer.
Thank you, Your Worship. He karakia mō te kaunihera o ngā roto o Rotorua. E te atua kaharawa ko koe te tohu rangatira, te tohu mātaronga. Mana ki tia mai mātou wō pononga I tēnei wā. E mahi ne I a mātou mahi mō te painga o ngā tangata o te kaunihera o ngā roto o Rotorua. Takua mai ki a tau te rangi marie ki runga I a mātou I a ngā wakatoa. Ko ihu karaiti, hoki tō mātou ariki. Āmeni. Almighty God, who alone is the leader of all mankind and the fountain of all knowledge, send thy blessing upon us, your servants, this day, as we strive to do all things good for the betterment of the people of the Rotorua district. May we be tolerant in ourselves at all times, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. We have no apologies this morning, so for this important meeting, it's great that we're all here. I move now to any declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? There appear to be none, but I wish to raise a point of that there has most definitely been a breach of our conflict of interest, Standing Order 20.8, non-financial conflicts of interest. Last night there was a letter in the media about today's vote from Grey Power, but it was signed by Councillor McPherson as the chairperson of RDRR. That is a very clear breach of Standing Order 20.8 at this stage of proceedings. So I want that noted on the record and we'll deal with that appropriately.
Point of order, Mayor. Could I respond to that? Ever so briefly, you indicated that the advertisement was signed by me from Grey Power. That's not actually the case. It's a matter of fact that it was signed by the Secretary of Grey Power. Thank you.
Yes. Sorry, I will not accept that. The actual, we have the actual copy here that is definitely signed. It says equal voting power, please, not just outcome parity, signed by Reynold McPherson, the RDRR chairman, 484 Pukehangi Road. My ruling still stands that that is a clear conflict of interest.
Sorry, you indicated it was from Grey Power.
Sorry, Your
Grey
Worship.
Power's advert is differentially signed.
Yeah.
So
Point of
your
order, Your
claim
Worship.
is not factually accurate at all.
No, I won't accept that at all.
Just to correct the record, Your Worship, there were two advertisements in the paper, one from Rotorua District residents and ratepayers and one from Grey Power. It's the RDRR one that was signed by Reynold McPherson.
So it is the RDR one that I'm referring to. We have the other letter, which was the open letter by Grey Power that was signed by Grey Power. This is the ad in the paper, equal voting power, signed by Reynold McPherson in your role as Chair RDR. So my ruling stands. There is a clear breach of interest, non-financial conflicts of interest, and we'll deal with that outside of this meeting. Right, I move now to any urgent items not on the agenda. There are none. We move now to recommendations from other committees. I need a mover and a seconder that the report recommendations from other committees be received. Do I have a mover? Councillor Yates, seconded. Councillor Kai Fong. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary?
Madam
I
Chair.
have two hands up here.
Oh, sorry, it was just a question.
I'll take Councillor Yates first, and then, was yours a question?
It's a question.
All right, well, we'll take Councillor Yates and then Councillor Kaifong.
Your Worship, I'd like to move a motion with regards to the recommendation that will be coming up for SPNF. And I would like to move that the Council, I've already submitted to the staff a motion that I'd like to put on the table, so the staff already have that. Is that possible?
Do you wish to...
So what I'm hearing there is that the councillor is signalling that she would like to move the motion. I think because we still have to move the receiving of the report, that we take the question from Councillor Kaifong, receive then the report, and then come back to Councillor Yates, who has signalled the moving of a motion.
So now your question, Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, it's just around the suspension of the standing orders. Because this is such an important issue, we did allow that in the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting to allow every councillor to have a full opportunity to speak to these issues, and because they are so important, I would ask that the standing orders be suspended, which allows councillors only to speak once.
This is a very important issue. I deem this as one of the most important that we're making. So I'm perfectly happy. Are we a seconder for that?
Second that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All those in favour of the suspension of standing orders to enable full debate, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Now back to your motion, Councillor Yates.
Just for clarification there, we need to go back to actually receiving
the report. So I'm now going to put that the report be received. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Now, Councillor Yates, in your indication, there you indicated that you have sent it through to Una?
Yes, I've sent it through to Una. And I'll, if you'd be with me, I'd like to just read through the motion that I'd like to propose for Council, of which there are 6 parts.
6 parts. Have we got them written?
Yes,
have you sent them
they'll
through?
be up shortly.
We're good.
So the first one is I'd like to confirm...
Could you read them all first, and then we'll take them individually so we can consider it?
Can we just have them up as soon as...
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
So with your indulgence, Council, if we can just give Hilda a few minutes, she needs to find the email where Councillor Yates has emailed that in, and then she can bring that up on the screen. Would you like Councillor Yates to start reading those out while we bring them up? Or wait?
I'm happy to. I'll read slow.
Nearly there.
Oh, she's got
Okay. So the first one is I'd like to confirm Council's commitment and ongoing support for Māori wards as made by Council in the resolution of the 21st of May 2021. The second one is I'd like to affirm that voters on the Māori electoral roll should not be permanently locked into a minority and should have equal opportunity as those on the general roll to vote for a council they consider will best represent their interests. There we talk about voter parity. Number 3, affirm the electoral system for Rotorua should honour the Rotorua Township Agreement 1880 and meet the principles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Number 4A, that we agree that the ideal representation model for Rotorua would comprise of 1 mayor elected at large, 1 Māori ward with 3 seats, 1 general ward with 3 seats, 4 at-large seats, a Rotorua Lakes Council, a Rotorua Lakes Community Board, a Rural Community Board. 4B, note that the preferred model, 4A above, is not currently enabled under the current Local Electoral Act, and that Council instructs the Chief Executive to pursue the necessary statutory reforms or other means by which the preferred model can be adopted by Council at the earliest time, including, if possible, prior to 2022 local election. I also note there that notwithstanding 4 above, the purpose of meeting the requirements of the Local Electoral Act, we have to agree an interim representation model comprising of 1 mayor elected at large, 1 Māori ward with 1 seat, 1 general ward with 1 seat, 8 at large seats, a Rotorua Lakes Council, kia ora mai, a Rotorua Lakes Community Board, a Rural Community Board, and that we note that in the interim model, 5 above, kia ora mai, 5 above, is that 4?
5.
5. Falls short of Council's preferred model, however, preserves the principle of voter parity, which is 2 above. I'd also like to move right now that if this is unsuccessful,
Carry on.
that for the purpose of the meeting requirements of Local Electoral Act, that we agree an interim representation model comprising of 1 mayor elected at large, 1 Māori ward with seats, 1 general ward with 4 seats, 4 at large seats, a Rotorua Lakes Community Board, a Rural Community Board, and I also note there that the interim model increases the number of seats in the Māori ward, however it fails to meet the principle of voter parity. Once again, see 2 above. Koira taku, hia ai tēnei wā.
Well, I need a seconder for 2, 3, 4 and 5.
I second that.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe Kawatate. Now, I will exercise my discretion here. This is a lot of thoughts obviously gone into this, and we will take each part for all members to be able to speak on. And that is an opportunity that we'll exercise through all 5 components. Yeah.
Just a question, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So are we deviating from the agenda so that the so does this become the motion that we're discussing and we are now waiving in its entirety what's in the agenda pack, just for clarity?
So through you, Madam Chair, this is now a substantive motion because you have a mover and a seconder. It is consistent with the recommendation that did come through from the SPNF. However, as you can see, provides a lot more information within it. However, because of its consistency with the recommendation from SPNF and now as a substantive motion, this is what the debate will be based upon.
Can I just have a further point of clarification? So the current resolution that's up there has got 2 parts to it. So it's saying part 1, we'll put this to the vote. If this fails, then it's part 2. So I don't quite see, are you foreshadowing a separate motion if this motion fails? So I just want to clarify the process.
That is correct. So Councillor Yates has foreshadowed that if part 4A, I think it is lost, she has foreshadowed that she will move the 244 model. And just to confirm, the Mayor has indicated that she will take each part of the resolution in turn, so working through them one by one.
So each clause, are we voting by 1?
You'll vote on 1, vote on 2, vote on 3, vote on 4, and so 4 to be taken as 4A and 4B, or are we changing okay, we're changing the numbering on me.
So at the conclusion of the vote in relation to 1, 2, 3 and 4, if that is not successful, is there an opportunity for any other foreshadowed motions to be put on the table now?
No.
Or are you saying that only because Councillor Yates has already indicated that? So I just want to make sure that the process is clear for everyone so that there is no...
This is the substantive motion before us now. Councillor Donaldson.
Point of clarification, Your Worship. It's 5A and 5B are the alternatives that are signalled. 4A is just signalling the ideal, but it's not something that we can implement today as the proposed representation model. It's 5A and 5B are the two alternatives.
Yeah, we'll take it section by section.
Excuse me, another point of clarity,
Yes.
please, on process. At what point, if these fail, at what point can another amendment be tabled?
Once we've gone through this to see whether it's carried
And would
or
it be
not.
helpful? Would it be helpful if the nature of that amendment was known in advance? I believe it.
Well,
it
it
would
should
be.
have been signalled if there was just as Councillor Yates has signalled, quite appropriately, in writing, that should have been signalled through to Mrs Hopkins.
Fine, but do you see the importance of members of elected members of council knowing in advance what an alternative, what another amendment, proposed amendment, could offer in the way of clarifying an alternative future to some of these arguments?
And I thank you
Can
for
I
that.
put that amendment now?
No, have you got it written?
Well, it's very simple. It's very simple. It's simply that the representation model be one mayor elected at large, a Maori ward with 3 seats and a general ward with 7 seats, and the rest of the community boards material remain the same.
Well,
That's
I
a very simple amendment,
it
and I think
certainly
now
is.
that everybody understands it.
Yeah. We needed in writing.
If they find a reason to say that. Everybody's heard it now.
If I just explain, we're all trying to find a solution through this, and we're just checking of the substantive nature of change in what you propose there. So can we just pause so that we give everybody a fair turn?
I do understand. The understanding is that I have is that it cannot be a negative amendment, but in this particular case it simply modifies the components of the SPNF recommendation.
Well,
Simplifies it.
so we're just
But
checking.
it's not negative,
Yep.
so therefore it should stand, in my view.
Well, no,
Thanks.
I make that ruling on advice. We need time out. We'll suspend the meeting for 5 minutes. Is that long enough? I move. Do I have a seconder that we suspend?
Yep,
Thank
yep.
you, Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Didn't want to start, oh, Gina's coming back. We wanted everyone at the table. Did we? Yep. Did indeed. Was a canter for you. Thank you. Right, I think I'll get Una to explain the process here. I cannot accept that amendment and Una will explain why.
So through you, Madam Chair, the amendment that Councillor McPherson has suggested is actually a direct negative to what is currently up there. So therefore it cannot be received at this point in time. Also, given that Councillor Yates has foreshadowed if this motion is lost, she has signalled the discussion around a 244 model, because that is consistent with discussions and recommendations already. That would be taken before any additional amendment. So what you have up on the screen before you is the substantive motion, and it's open for debate.
Right, we'll move now on the debate, and as the...
Sorry, I did signal I had a question earlier, and the question is actually the same point that you've given, and thank you for that advice on why Councillor McPherson wasn't able to put his option as a direct negative, when in fact, in a way, you also have a direct negative in there, because that was actually the option that was voted down on Tuesday. So I'm struggling as a chair who also understands standing orders to understand how in an amendment you can put up an option that actually would predetermine what the elected members would want in the event that what's currently on the table would be lost, if that makes sense. So you're predetermining and restricting us in our options on if the vote on the matter that was in our agenda is won or lost. So while it's an amended motion, it's an inclusion, I believe that it does go too far in actually determining an outcome, no matter what the voters are, depending on what the voters of the first motion that goes forward. So to put it really simple,
344 is
we're
consistent.
choosing a model, whether we support it or not. That's our democratic right as elected members. And if we support it, that's okay. We don't need that second bit. If we don't support it, by including this amended motion, you are actually predetermining what the next discussion will be, without opening it up for discussion from elected members on why they may have voted against the initial model in the first place. And the purpose for me asking this is the model that's been put up was the model that was not accepted on Tuesday as, was it 2B? And instead we went with 2A. So in a way, it already has been voted down by elected members. So I'm just wanting to make sure that the process is fair.
No, not at all. It was carried.
So through you, Your Worship, so if you scroll down a little bit, 5A is the motion or is the model that was voted on at SPNF and is contained in the recommendation. So Councillor Yates has put forward effectively a motion which includes additional aspects that were included in the report. She's also foreshadowed, as I understand it, an intent, should 5A fail, that she wishes to move a further motion, which has been accepted by the chair.
I appreciate that, but my question was that further motion was actually voted down on Tuesday.
And
Point
I'm
of
going
order,
to make
Your
a
Worship.
ruling.
The alternative motion was not voted on at
No, it wasn't.
SPNF at all. It was there as an alternative at SPNF, but we didn't vote on it because the first motion was passed by the casting vote of the chair.
The point of order, it was either option A or option B. Option B was not favoured, option A was favoured, therefore B was voted down.
No, I rule that out of order. This is carried over from the committee meeting and expanded. So I'm going to proceed with the substantive debate now over each section here. So as the mover, Councillor Yates.
Madam Chair, I just have a further question, just of clarification. So are we saying...
I've ruled, but will it change the ruling?
No, I just wanted to clarify. So is the second part of Councillor Yates' motion a foreshadowed motion?
Yes. It is a foreshadowed motion. So we take the substantive motion...
So the rules around how we can speak to amendments and foreshadowed motions still stands under the standing rules?
No, we take this in parts and then we move, if this is lost, we then move to the foreshadowed motion where amendments can be made.
So just to clarify, because at the last Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting when Mr Eugene Berryman-Camp tried to move an amendment, he wasn't allowed to speak because he'd already spoken against the previous motion. So I just want to clarify what are the speaking rights in terms of councillors, because we've got a motion on the table with a foreshadowed motion and Councillor McPherson has already indicated another foreshadowed motion. So I'm just not clear if we're now going to be caught out by not being able to speak to the motion, the option that we want, if
Well, some members want, so we don't know
so
yet.
I'm just wanting to clarify the process so that we're not caught by the process of not being able to speak to the options or motion that we want to.
Can I just clarify through the chair again? I think it's the same confusion I think that Councillor Tapsell had here, in that at SPNF you did not have two models and you could choose to vote for this model or this model.
That's right.
They were not considered simultaneously, they were considered consecutively. So in other words, you take one model, you debate the merits of that model, then you vote on it. If that model is voted successfully, then it actually becomes your decision. If it is lost, then you move to the next option and debate that and to vote on it. So you move through successively through these options.
And that is how I've ruled. So that that wasn't what I was trying to clarify. I was just trying to clarify in terms of the standing rules, where people speak to a motion which is currently on the table, which is what is up there. If there was then to be a foreshadowed motion or an amended motion, then under these rules, people that have already spoken may not then speak again. And I just wanted that clarified. Is that the case or not? we
with what's happening
suspended.
here?
I'm very clear. You asked
So
for us and we voted
that's what I'm just
suspend standing
clarifying. So
orders.
we are able to keep speaking regardless of whatever motion is on the table, that standing order has also been suspended.
That is the suspension of standing orders to allow free debate.
Thank you. That's all the clarification I wanted.
We're going to move now, and I'll move back to the mover of the substantive motion for the first right of reply, and this is free debate, and we'll move to point 1. Confirm its commitment and ongoing support for Māori wards as made by Council on the 21st of May 2021. To you, Councillor Yates.
So ki te kōrua hau e pāna ki tērā, mā te kite mā te hangaka puawai a popo. On the 21st of May, Yes Council voted on a Māori ward. Prior to that, we were tasked, following that, we were tasked with taking a fresh look at the structure of the membership of our council and the way they were elected or are elected. We were guided by two values of being fair and effective. Particular reference to that particular note around our Māori wards. Our community have already demonstrated that they vote for a variety of people, different ethnicities, different genders, different ages, different backgrounds, clearly different matters. We voted that day for a Māori ward, And I'd like to leave my koho ki kora because Māori wards apparently have mattered to our council and they definitely matter to our people.
Point of order. Oh.
Else wish to speak to point 1? No?
Madam,
Councillor Kumar, you may.
good morning. Madam Chair, I think what Councillor Yates indicated was that we decided to vote for a Maori ward. I think that day it wasn't just a single Maori ward, it was Maori wards. You've indicated that it was a Maori ward. We didn't discuss a single Maori ward.
That's Māori wards. We didn't. That vote in May indicated support for Māori wards. We didn't say numbers in May. What?
Apologies, Councillor Kumar.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to speak to that? I'll just speak briefly that was a very big issue that came before us, and we listened in that debate. I think we were all challenged by the fact that we had a partnership board, Te Tata o Te Arawa, and then an opportunity for Māori wards. And that outcome from there led us on a journey, and I totally support the commitment for support for a Māori ward. That was one of our big debates, and today we're sorting out what it looks like. Does anyone else wish to speak? Yes.
I'd like to take up this point. I think that the decision taken on 21st of May was the end point of quite a complex argument, and people supported components and were disappointed by other components, but we did go through that democratic process and we voted in support of a Maori ward. And for me, that was the end of that democratic process. And so I would agree with this motion number 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Nobody else wishes to speak, so we go to point 2.
Mover for that one, Madam Chair.
All right, we're going to put it. So do I have a mover?
Just confirmed. We have a mover and a seconder for everything in its entirety, but the chair has indicated that she wants to take each
separately.
Part voting separately. So here we will just record when she puts point 1 to the vote. We'll record whether that is carried or not.
So I move that we confirm our commitment to ongoing support for a Māori ward as made by Council on the 21st of May. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Carried. Okay, unanimously. Second, affirm that voters on the Māori electoral roll should not be permanently locked into a minority and should have equal opportunity as those on a general roll to vote for a council they consider will best represent their interests. Voter parity. Wish to speak to that as the mover?
The only comment I'd like to make about that is about voter parity. And with that, I'd like to talk about the equal voice and the equal footing at the table, as has come through with all of the submissions and the hearings that we observed and listened to. Many of them referred to the opportunity, the fair and effective opportunity for our community to have their vote counted. We are all elected here today because their vote counted. So ka waihotaku kōrero ki kora.
Okay, does anyone, yes, Councillor Kaufong?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a little bit of difficulty with the wording of this particular motion. So I think that by affirming the fact that we wanted Māori wards, we are affirming that, yes, we do want Māori to have an opportunity to participate in this democratic process. But the legislation talks about fair and effective representation, and it also does say that there may be a disparity between those two things because they butt up against each other. So the fairness in terms of voter parity may not be what Māori consider is effective representation. And we have had submissions from our partnership board, Te Tata Aotearoa, around what they consider is their preferred model. And for them, it's not around the number of votes that each person gets. What it is for them is about the effectiveness of those Māori voices at the table. And so their preference is for guaranteed Māori seats within the Māori ward rather than having equal votes. So I think that the wording...
Madam Chair, point of order on that. You're certainly making an assumption that you might know what Māori feel. I would want to correct you on that.
I'm simply...
Actually, you are... I was going to say that you're not quite aware, I think, of what you're speaking about.
Well, I'm sorry about that. I'm just simply reading from the submission that was sent to council, so apologies if that has been taken the wrong way, but the notes that I made at the time of the submission hearing was that equity restoration was that it was seats around the table, not around the number of individual votes. So that is how I took that. So,
and you have your right to present that view.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on it? Councillor McPherson, then Councillor
Yes, thanks very much. The difficulty I have with this motion is that the decision that a citizen makes to join one role or another is not within our remit. It is technically, the statement is ultra vires, in that it's beyond our authority as a level of government to lock or not lock people into a minority. It's in fact a decision made by an individual citizen, and they have equal opportunity to, in the fullness of time of course, to join or change the role they belong to. So I don't see how it follows logically from an ultra-virus position into a discussion on voter parity. Voter parity draws on a different set of ideas.
Point of order.
Point of order?
The only point of order is the fact that whilst we're here deliberating today, the issue that we currently are sitting in is we are bound by an electoral act that doesn't allow the voter to change electoral rolls. So we are bound for another 3 years, which in effect does not allow voter parity. So I do agree with that, but it is not the voter's choice to be bound by that per se.
That's not technically a point of order. But it is a point made. You may continue, Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. Yes, look, I respect that position, but the citizen's decision to join one or the other is not part of our capacity, our scope as a decision-making body. And with regard to the concept of voter parity, we're here talking about equal suffrage, which it gels on various ideas around each voter having the same degree of voting power. And equal suffrage obliges, through the Act on New Zealand's Act on Human Rights, that each person has the same degree of authority when it comes to voting, and they should have, therefore, that equal opportunity. So the logic in here, I'm afraid, falls down on an assumption of which is ultra-virus, and secondly, it does not give full understanding to the concept of equal suffrage. Thank you.
Does anyone else? It was Councillor Maxwell and then Councillor Tapsell.
Yeah, all I want to add here, and we know there's more other opportunities for debate, but I want to say that I'll be supporting this. I'm on the Maori roll, and I didn't go on the Maori roll for the local body elections. It was done for the general elections. So, yeah, there is a bit of an anomaly there. So all I want to say is that, I see the wording on there meaning that for some are permanently locked into a minority, and that's true, because if this motion doesn't go through, we're back to it not being parity. No use talking about parity then. So all I'm going to say is I'm on the Māori roll, and I see where the mover of this is trying to help us understand the voting situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. This motion absolutely infuriates me. We had an opportunity to not lock Māori into being a minority by not introducing Māori wards, and I warned that the introduction of Māori wards would restrict anyone on the Māori roll to potentially only being able to vote for those in the Māori seats on the Māori wards. I warned you fairly, Council did not listen, and here we are in an absolute mess where it's a lose-lose. We're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't, and Māori don't feel like they're going to be any better off. So I'm very frustrated that that even has to be on here. I feel that this is almost a deliberate attempt to manipulate this process to get to the outcome that is wanted.
Point of order, Councillor Tapsell. Please withdraw and apologise for your wording of manipulation. Any member has the right to put forward a motion, and you're speaking to it with logic. But the word manipulation, could you please withdraw?
I'm not sure what other word there would be to describe it.
Won't withdraw. Well, will you withdraw that word manipulation? You're implying that a colleague of yours is, with this motion, is being manipulative. That is very unfair.
Point of order also, Madam Chair. The implication is that fellow councillors will allow themselves to be manipulated. In my case, certainly not.
Thank you.
I withdraw the perception that it was manipulation of councillors. My concern is that this process, with the amendments listed as they are, which are very different to what the original agenda is, actually restricts our abilities as elected members to make a decision for what we think would be best for the residents of Rotorua, with having that second model on there. So I do withdraw and apologise if any of my fellow colleagues felt that that word manipulation was directed at them. It wasn't, it was at the process. But my frustration still remains about affirming that voters on the Māori electoral roll should not be permanently locked into a minority. That is exactly what Māori wards do for Rotorua, uniquely to Rotorua, because we previously held such a strong position. That is my thoughts on that, and I will be voting against this motion for those reasons. So I want to make that clear, that I'm voting against, because I believe that Māori should never have been restricted in the first place.
Councillor, yes, Councillor Roke, I will take them.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the past, Rotorua has been in the unique position where we have had Māori around the table, absolutely, and that has been the case. However, that could change at any election, and there may be no Māori at this table. We have a government that earlier this year said there is unfairness towards Māori who are attempting to get at least one person on local authorities. That's what the government said. That's why the minister introduced a bill to say this will happen. This will happen because invariably every time a council attempted to get one ward, one Māori seat, it was voted down. So that's why we're having this discussion today. And the Māori wards are created to give Māori an opportunity to participate and add value to the decision-making of council and councils throughout the country. It's not complex.
No.
I've sat here this morning and I've heard, ridiculous arguments. It is not complex. And we can change it. Every 6 years, you know that, we have a review. So, certainly I will support this.
Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Worship. I think some of the points have been made. I think to and I'll be supporting this particular clause. I think it's consistent with the first one, which was adopted unanimously, the confirmation of Maori wards. Our stance, previous stance on Maori wards was unanimously adopted, if I recall, a few minutes ago. And I acknowledge that my colleague Councillor Tapsell made a principled approach at the time of that debate, but the point remains that the electoral rolls are there for the purpose of the parliamentary elections, and so, as Councillor Maxwell pointed out, and so it, ironically, this clause actually strikes at the opening headline of an advertisement in the paper, equal voting power, please. And it's how you interpret equal voting power. For me, that's every voter, regardless of which role they're on, votes for the same number of councillors. So I'll be supporting.
And I wish to speak in support of this. And for me, it's very, very simple, actually, that you get locked into an electoral roll for the purposes of general elections, not for local body elections. And we must change that, and that comes up subsequently. It is absolutely wrong that there's an unequal vote if you're locked onto the Maori roll. That is the simple, that's it in a nutshell. It is wrong. Why should someone on a Maori roll have fewer votes than someone on the general roll? It's illogical. And so I think we're getting overly complex about this. I certainly will be affirming this. Does anyone else wish to speak?
Can I have the opportunity to speak again?
Those that haven't, Councillor Wang, would you like to speak to this? Just to hear everybody. This is our free and open debate.
Do I not get the chance to speak again?
Yes, you'll get a chance,
Thank
but I'd
you.
like others who haven't had a chance to speak.
I'm happy for Councillor McPherson to make his comments first before I make mine.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wang. Appreciated. The three major impediments to the parity arguments are, first of all, the disparity between the size of the Maori and general electoral populations of citizens. And this is something we have no control over. And it's an unfortunate accident of history almost. But to press on with parity when there is this gross disparity is a mistake, because it would give those on the Maori roll, from many of their proposals, much increased voting power. And one of the slogans which goes with equal suffrage is one person, one vote, one power. And the other factors are the legal requirements in the Electoral Act for representation to satisfy democratic criteria, including equal suffrage, can't be swept aside, and the Local Government Commission will make sure that we do not sweep them aside. And of course, I draw attention to the weight of public opinion that was expressed at the hearings and the open letters that you've referred to, and particularly by Te Tauta this morning. Their implacable demand is that they believe, on democratic grounds, they deserve proportionate representation. That's part of equal suffrage. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? It's a time for you to show your concerns or your frustrations. Nobody else wishes to speak. Councillor Wang, you didn't wish to speak on this.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to reserve my comments till later on in this debate.
You can. Don't feel pushed.
I know. But to speak on this second motion on the table, again, I will be in support of this motion. We have made the decision to introduce Māori wards, and I acknowledge Councillor Tapsell's comments on this, that directly or indirectly, the introduction of Māori wards will affect as we are discussing now, the makeup of our future council. However, I do absolutely agree that whether they're on the Māori electoral roll or not, that they should have the equal opportunity, everyone should have the equal opportunity to vote for a council they consider representative of them and of our district, and something that will reflect our diversity as a district as well. And I'll leave my comments at that for this one.
Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I've always believed when it comes to the most important decision that only Māori should make decisions as bestowed by mana whenua. We all probably have an opportunity over here, but when a non-Māori makes a decision for Māori, it's really polarizing. We sit over here, and sometimes we are voting about Māori, sometimes we are voting about Te Arawa, sometimes we are voting about Ngāti Whakaui. Sometimes I don't know where the point of difference lies, and yet I make a decision that is based sensible. And so all I can see in the last year, since COVID has come in, is that we're being divided. 90% of the population is vaccinated, Māori is 62%. 62% is vaccinated here, Māori is 64%.
Councillor, those facts are wrong, but I get your principle. Continue.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to, Madam Chair, what I'm trying to indicate is that there is a divide, and that's what we've got over here. Forget the conflict of interest, forget the procedural moves that were made today. This indirectly looks like we are heading into a territory that is far beyond what the scope of the workshops were. We never discussed any other alternative motions. This is like money heist. And when there was a simple plan, and the simple plan was to execute a representation. But accordingly, as the days have gone by and as the meetings have prospered into now an interlock as to where we're going to go, and the best procedural move is going to make the day. And either, as fellow Councillor Tanya Tapsell had indicated, there was no confusion, even though the Chief Executive mentioned in his reply to that she was confused. I don't think there was any confusion. She was very clear about what options were there. There was an option A and a B that was never discussed. So when option A was...
I think you've strayed from that.
No, Madam Chair, I'm not...
It's very narrow here. You'll have a chance to speak on the entire motion at the end. So we've broken this down. I'm giving you, it's just about that Māori on the electoral roll shouldn't be locked in. That's what we're discussing. That's all that we're discussing. Or your other points are fine, but they are at the end probably. Carry on if you wish to, but you haven't really talked about this particular narrow motion.
No, I think I have made my point.
Does anyone else wish to speak on this? No? Well, I'm going to put the motion. That Council affirms that voters on the Māori electoral roll should not be permanently locked into a minority and should have equal opportunity as those on the general roll to vote for a council they will consider that best represents their interests. Voter parity. All those in favour, please raise their hands. Against? The motion is carried. We move now to 3. Pardon? 6. Yeah. No. I get corrected by Mrs. Hopkins if I get it wrong. Thank you. Move now to point 3. You wish to speak to that, Councillor Yates?
So this particular one, I've actually got a particular quote here from Wana Maniapoto on Te Ao with Moana. The word partnership, when we look at this particular one, does not appear in any version of Te Tiriti, yet the Court of Appeal in 1988 identified it as a very key principle. So with that, I also turn to Joe Williams, Judge Joe Williams, who spoke about that to our people in 1840, for them and now, the transaction was relational. Partnership is such a powerful concept. The concept of partnership is relational, and I'd probably like to leave it there when we look at this particular motion.
Does anybody, Councillor Maxwell, you had your hand up? And Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, this is the opportunity where we can really, truly address some of the things that, and actually redress. We go right back to 1880 when it started. We're getting a lot of, at times, opposition against trying to achieve parity. And they used the population model, but they didn't use that way back in 1880 when Maori was the majority. And the township was set up, even then was an anomaly, 2-1. But what I do want to say also is to people who might not understand a little bit more who's Te Arawa and who's Ngāti Whakau and who's who in the zoo, we need to sort of make it clear this is not pitching one against the other. Both gave submissions. Both gave very good submissions, but they didn't agree. And Ngāti Whakau came forward, gave an excellent, I thought, submission. If I can, I've got my notes in front of me from the hearings, and they made it clear to us. Ngāti Whakau said their mana whenua ne rohe and collectively represent the largest landholding and therefore ratepayer base in Rotorua. And they also said, number 3, we note that Te Tātou o Te Aroa have provided a submission. The Ngāti Whakau economic entities were asked to support that submission, but they respectfully declined in order to provide their own separate submission. And they've always been consistent. That means it's a 50-50 role, and for the first time in my short time on council is a chance to really make it 50-50. And there's been some bold discussions in our workshops and various things that we discussed, lots of models, but for the first time, I see an opportunity for us to really redress and put some of the things right by honouring the Treaty of Waitangi, and Parliament does, and also the Fenton Agreement. And for me, Ben Manley's report on the Fenton Agreement here, which was, it was negotiated between Ngāti Whakau, Ngāti Rangiwewehi, which I'm a proud member of, and Ngāti Uenuku Kōpako. So to me, if we support and we can get these motions through, we are honouring something that goes right back to the Fenton Agreement and honouring the Treaty of Waitangi. Kia ora koutou.
Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Worship. So, as a resident of Rotorua since 1969, I first came here, and having married a person who's on the Maori roll, and we'll be celebrating the last motion that we carried. I too support Clause 3. Through my role in the public service and the police here since 1969, and my life in this city, I've found nothing but welcoming and manaakitanga from mana whenua, from the tangata whenua. And when Councillor Kumar talks about division and divisiveness, I think back to when I attended a full-day workshop instruction session on the Treaty of Waitangi and its importance. We are not divided. We are together in a partnership in this country. And
Point of order.
Yes. Yes.
My point is, I'm saying that there is a different reporting all the time in the media. One reporting Maori states, one reporting general states. That's all I indicated. So there is a division between two different.
I understand what you were trying to put.
I accept that, and I'm trying to counter that perspective by this. This clause speaks to correcting that perception that's out there, and I agree with you, Councillor Kumar. But I disagree that we are divided. And look, in terms of vaccination rates, I think it was.
I think we should stick to the take here, which is the Fenton Agreement.
Yeah.
Yes, and could we get the vaccination rates up? Carry on, Councillor Donaldson.
So, in my view, the treaty speaks to we are in a partnership. I do think it was an astute ruling by the Prime Minister not to insist on a 90% vaccination rate for Māori so that they were not vilified, and that.
Back to the take.
Apologies, Your Worship. I can't help myself. But I feel passionate about this one because I've felt nothing but manaakitanga, respect, and from mana whenua and tangata whenua, and I feel very comfortable that this community is in a partnership relationship, and it's great that we're affirming that here today. So I'll be in support of Clause 3. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I just want to remind people what the principles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi actually is, which was partnership, participation and protection, and of course the all-important self-determination. Now we have an iwi partner that sits at the table, Te Tātou o Te Arawa, who were very clear to us, who participated in the process, and their version of self-determination, of having their own ability to determine their future, was their clear feedback to us that they wanted 3 Māori seats and 7 general seats. So while I do support the motion, I just want to highlight that the principles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, we have not been great partners with feedback based on the last hui from Te Tātou o Te Arawa to honour what they were asking for, which was the 3-7. And also, just a point.
Point of order, that was not the submission from Te Tātou o Te Arawa. No. It was 3-1-6.
Thank you. I was not referring to the submission. I was referring to the feedback that we received on Tuesday meeting, but I'll take that on board. And also draw your attention to affirming the electoral system and just highlighting that it unfortunately is the electoral system that is the issue for us, and why we are unfortunately being divided on an issue yet still wanting the same aspirations for our community. So I'll support the principles of this, but just want to remind people that it is the local electoral act system that is hindering our process of ensuring the best for our community.
Aye. Councillor Kumar? We'll stay away from vaccination.
Well, I'm going to go to another place. Thank you, Madam Chair. And through the Chair, for those of us, or those of me that come from the zoo, I see 2 principles over here on the same Te Tiriti o Waitangi. One that is fighting for it, and one that is still fighting for it, but from a different point of view. So we got sent from a board member at the Tato board, different principles, sharing the same principles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. So there lies the anomaly for those of us that come from the zoo as to which one is correct.
Thank you. And
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, this one here, of course, I'm going to vote in support of this. It really just means that we're starting to mature and there's absolutely nothing wrong with voting for this and honouring the original intent of the Rotorua Township Agreement and also the principles of the treaty. So it's just we're just maturing, that's all.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to support the principles that are stated up there, but just in terms of the background to this, I don't think that we should be having to affirm or justify any rationale for what is coming up in the later part of the motion that's been foreshadowed. I think that what we do have is an electoral system that we are stuck with, and we are trying to work within that. So this is an aspiration for us, but we are still stuck with what the law says, and we must work within that. And, you know, currently it probably doesn't really honour the Rotorua Township Agreement, and even though we might affirm that here today, the actual weight of that affirmation probably doesn't go anywhere because we're bound by these rules of the Electoral Act. So I just simply make that point.
I wish to speak in support of this. Since I've been here as a councillor and a mayor, I've heard about the way that we ignore the Fenton Agreement. And I was very touched actually when Kihi Tawhai talked about tukuitu. He talked about the granting of the township and the Fenton Agreement, and then a response back. And that concept is what we're just discussing today. How do we get to that fairness of that concept from those who originally granted the township? I think this is a very important clause to be in here to be discussed today, because it underpins something that we should all be proud of, that Rotorua is different. And we're different because we've had the gifting of the township. And in the past, we had an electoral system that didn't guarantee anybody to get on to council. And we're moving incrementally towards that goal. And it's a very important concept for us to reaffirm today. Also because I think it's next week, isn't it? It's the 121st year? 21st. 141st. Yes, commemoration of the signing of the Fenton Agreement. So how significant is this for us to be discussing this as a principle today? And I was very moved also when Whakaui came and presented. That changed my paradigm, and I saw it much more simply. And we get to the numbers next, but I saw co-governance 1-1 seems very watered down for what we all agreed, but it is the start. So I'm pleased this is here, and I'll be speaking in support of this. And it was the process of submissions and presenters that I'm proud that this is in here. And all of us as councillors should be proud that we understand the journey of the granting and the gifting of this land for our township. That's why we're here. So I will certainly be voting in support of this. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. Yes, look, I appreciate the comments that have gone before me, and I too support number 3, even though it's been decontextualised and isolated from democratic principles. But the Fenton Agreement is well understood by large numbers of people, and in particular Te Tātua Te Arawa understand the Fenton Agreement, and they want 3 Maori seats. That's an implacable expectation, and I think that needs to be honoured. But secondly, when it comes back to the treaty itself, the reason why I support this is that the Article 3 in the treaty, as translated by Professor Sir Hugh Kafaru, he says, well, he quoted, his statement is, quote, "The Queen of England will protect all of the ordinary people of New Zealand and give them the same rights and duties of citizenship as the people of England. The same rights and duties as citizens, not more, not less, the same. And those same conditions of citizenship are with us today in law on human rights and on how we organise and conduct elections, that promise that we as citizens will have the same rights and responsibilities, irrespective of ethnicity. I think it's a very, very important point. Another one is that the right to sovereignty, that is the right to rule, is vested in democratic legislation. It's vested in each of us as citizens. We aggregate our individual sovereignty through the ballot box, and we give our consent to be governed by elected members until the next election. Now, the running of the equal parity argument through towards co-governance, I think is wrong. I think it's misheaded. It's a mistake, because that would imply that a group of unelected people can sit alongside elected people, elected members, and have governance oversight. And that phrase, governance oversight, was specifically mentioned as a description of how we conduct business here when we responded to the Minister's views on Three Waters, her proposals on Three Waters. So I support this because the actual treaty article determines our system, our electoral system, is derived from a concept of citizenship, vested in individuals. And indeed, the word democracy means rule by the people. So I would only accept this, and I do accept this, as long as it's put in the context of democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. You are, and then we'll put the vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just briefly want to, again, it's not Te Arawa Tātou versus Ngāti Whakaue. In their submission also, Te Tātou, their final one was, they said, while a 50-50 split of power would be preferred, is what they said. We recognise it needs changes, and that's going to come later. And in Ngāti Whakaue's submission, they said against all what they presented, it is against this background that we expect our voice and view herein to carry weight and influence. So there's an important, large iwi, sub-tribe of Te Arawa that are saying one thing, and actually Te Tātou are saying that is what they would prefer, but they know what the rules are at the moment. So it's not Te Arawa versus Ngāti Whakaue. I just reiterate that. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Carried unanimously. I shouldn't comment, but that's profound. Well done, councillors, because that is the reason why we're here today. Moving on to clause 4, agree that the ideal representation model for Rotorua would comprise, not compromise, and I'll over to you. We know this one.
We do know this one, and just in reference to our whanaunga and whānau of Te Tatau, I acknowledge you today. I acknowledge you today because I am also sitting here at the table as an elected member of council, but are well aware that you are watching, you are listening, you are also concerned about where we are sitting, because 3 seats is not 50-50. 3 seats are not partnership. And with this particular model, this was the best model that we could come up with and unanimously supported. But as I've noted below, unfortunately, we are unable to get this one across the table. So I still stick firmly to this preferred model, and I don't need to describe it anymore, but I'll allow my colleagues to add comment and debate if necessary around this particular model. Ka wai hoki kora.
Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Worship. Look, I'll be in support, and this is where the majority of us got to, I think, in a workshop. But my question was around the te reo names for the Māori ward and the general ward. I've not seen those words before, so I wondered if someone could give me some background about the significance of i Pukaria and why Tāroe? Thank you.
Look, that is in the consultation document. Kihi, I don't think we should get you here where this is a voting and debating. So do go back to your consultation document. Yeah. Does anyone else wish to speak to this? Councillor McPherson.
Just to point out that the 334 model was the model that I believe, because I still haven't seen the written advice or even had a summary of the verbal advice, I believe, that came from the Local Government Commission, which determined that this option is unlawful. And it's unlawful because it violates the current law, which is based on a set of democratic assumptions about the appropriateness of distribution of power to votes. So I can't possibly, unless even at this late stage I saw that written advice, I might be able to support this, but at the moment it is unlawful. Thank you.
And I'll speak to this as well, that we thought we'd got there, and there's been some discussion, and at times I've felt like this is what we believe in. We should just jolly well put it forward, and the Electoral Commission can say whether or not we're right. But that would be unavoidable costs, actually, so I'm happy for the next section. But this was a sticking point, I believe, with Te Tata o Te Arawa. And they quite rightly, and they've been consistent saying, we want 3 seats. We want 3 seats. And they put that take on the table very firmly, very consistently, and still haven't swayed from it. And I actually thank them for that, for bringing that to our wider table. And we all heard it. And we thought we'd got there. However, through the bonkers nature of electoral law, we can't have it. So we need to change that. So I am in support of this. I'd have loved to have tested our preferred model. And I do acknowledge the partnership that Te Tata o Te Arawa worked through with us and put that on the table. And that's why we're endeavouring to get to the right end resolution place today, to make sure that the partnership that we have is still fair and of high trust. So I'm glad you put that forward. Councillor
Your
Yates.
Worship, sorry, just a point of clarification. Yes. 4A and 4B, are we voting that as a whole, or are we voting for A and B separately?
A and B together.
Together.
Yeah. We've talked about the anomaly of the Act, so they're taken as one. And that will be, I like the wording in here for 4B. He will be instructed, the Chief Executive, to move at some pace. Councillor McPherson.
Forgive me, I misunderstood. I thought we were discussing 4A.
Well, it's 4A and B
Yes,
together.
I understand
You
that.
sort of
Now,
can't
thank you for your
decouple.
clarification.
Yeah.
I think it's improper that a council would instruct an official to pursue efforts to get electoral changes. I think it's a very clear line between the role of governance and management, and the former group are formally required to make policy, and the latter, management, are formally required to implement their decisions, implement policy. But this actually enables and indeed instructs the Chief Executive to become politically active. And I know that this is not a requirement at local government level, but it is at national level, and it's more or less regarded as being a moral imperative that you keep these two functions separate. Otherwise it leads to confusion and it leads to political activism, potentially, by officials. So I think this is a very important and wrong-headed statement.
It's not immoral. It's absolutely the imperative of local councils. That's why they have local bills. And council at any time. We had a local bill about Easter trading. We've had local bills before that we've instructed the Chief Executive to move with, to represent the majority view of council. Councillor Donaldson.
Oh, with respect.
Thank you for letting me speak again, Your Worship, and I reject the previous assertion. Council employs one official, and that is the Chief Executive, and the Chief Executive is employed to carry out the will of Council. And so if Council supports instructing the Chief Executive, as is outlined in the recommendation here, then that is his job to fulfil that instruction. And so that is entirely appropriate. There's nothing inappropriate about this clause whatsoever. It's not interfering in operational. It's setting out a policy position of the council and instructing the Chief Executive to do his best endeavours to implement it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Kaifong.
Just a question for clarification, because we are asking the Chief Executive to get confirmation of a model that's currently not possible under the electoral legislation, and because we at some point today have to make a decision around a potential model, so we will have a compliant model that we will go to we will have at the end of this process. But there may still be, whatever the model is, an objection by the community. So how does that work in parallel, where we have a process that still has to be completed with the compliant model and the Chief Executive campaigning or advocating for a currently non-compliant model? Because
Councillor Kaifong, I think that requires clarification.
yes, I think it does.
It's the Electoral Act that we will ask the Chief Executive to pursue. And that's about people being able to choose to go on which roll for the purpose of local body elections. We're not going to the Crown to say, we want this model, please help us get there.
Well, I think it says by any other means. So I was just trying to get that clarification, because the Electoral Act is not just around the number of seats and votes. It's all this. There's a whole complicated mathematical calculation. There is, how's that fair and effective representation? So all of those other values and sets of rules that are set out in the Electoral Act can't just, I just don't know how we affect that kind of change to come to what would be our ideal model when it's a total overhaul, if you like, of what the current legislation says. So I just wanted to get that clarification on the table, because I think that we're challenging ourselves in two different ways.
To what he hears.
So through you, Your Worship, my understanding is that there was a similar clause, obviously, that was contained in an SPNF recommendation. So I've had a discussion. I don't want to say I've sought legal advice. I've had a discussion with a legal representative as to how this could possibly occur, and there are a number of ways that this could be pursued. One of them is achieving a simple step-out opportunity for Rotorua away from the legislation to allow this model to be implemented. You're raising the question about, could the step-out option be challenged, and that will need to be something that is actually considered when we actually move through a process to actually achieve the outcomes that I think you're instructing me to actually consider.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to draw people's attention to the fact that this is the ideal representation model, and the Māori ward has 3 seats. And I want to draw attention to that, because that is what, and we'll put it to a vote at some stage, but through the discussions that I believe has been the desired outcome for the majority of my council colleagues, as well as our Te Arawa partners here in Rotorua. And so while it is disappointing that we can't have the two, I will be, in my decision, maintaining the the priority or the desire to have as many seats as possible and honour the request from Te Arawa to have 3 seats within the Māori ward. And then I do also just want to defer our attention slightly, because we have been so distracted by the Māori wards, to also note that throughout this process, in our ideal and desired model, our Rotorua Lakes Community Board and our Rural Community Board have never been up for discussion, because we are very grateful for the work that they do, and we do have the chair people, Phil Thomas of the Rotorua Lakes Community Board and Shirley Trumper of the Rural Community Board, and I want to acknowledge the hard work that does come from them. They virtually work on a donation basis, but they're here in the seats every meeting, making sure that the Lakes and Rural Community Board are represented at the table, and they ensure that, so I really wanted to make that point, that our Lakes and Rural Community Board and residents have been very happy with the hard work that you guys have done too, and we are very grateful for it. So I wanted to make sure that we thank you while we have the opportunity.
Thank you. I see another word up there says ideal. At our SPNF, the words were preferred, and then there was also desired. All of those words encapsulates 4A. And to me, this is a win-win, not only for Te Arawa tātou, for Ngāti Whakaue, because it takes on board all their true concerns. I'm also fairly confident, well, you're never confident in politics, but I'm sure that ideally the Commission and even the Minister of Local Government, who actually brought in the wards so quickly, it caught us all on the hop at the beginning. That the desired ones will go through. So I will be strongly supporting this, because it's a win-win for all of us. Ideal, preferred, desired, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. My concern is that this debate about this particular 4A and 4B proceeds on an assumption that you've got to choose between one or other of 2 what appear to be irreconcilable philosophies, political philosophies, or if you like, sets of values about governance, the best, most appropriate form of governance for our setting. And one position clearly shared by some of my colleagues is that co-governance is very important as an aspirational target. And en route for that, 3 seats at the moment would be an appropriate step. But to describe the other set of values that we're more or less we're just sort of sweeping aside, that is the democratic values. These are the values that lie behind current legislation. These are the values, democratic values, that lie behind the preference of significant groups in our community here for saying, no, co-governance is a mistaken step. And it's not because, to use your word, Mayor, because they're bonkers. It's in fact that they've got 2 systems of knowledge. You describe that way of thinking, that set of that legislation as being bonkers, because it doesn't cohere with the co-governance political philosophy. I understand that, but to describe the alternative set, or the other set that's being belittled through this process, that is a democratic set of values, as bonkers, I think is quite wrong-headed, and it might be better for us to search for degrees of common ground between us, and one aspect of the common ground is 3 seats for the Maori ward. And if you use that set of decision rules that you're going to allow it because it satisfies co-governance and democratic sets of values, I just suggest it might be wise to offer the same privileges to those on the general roll if we're going to be consistent. Hence the 3-7 option. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got to turn it on. Councillor Rotorua Tate, did you wish to speak? Sorry, it's hard ducking backwards and forwards.
Yes, yes, I do, Your Worship. It's just really around the Local Electoral Act. You know, it really is, it's quite sad that we can't have the option that we would like to have go forward to the Local Government Commission. And I think that earlier this year, when the Minister for Local Government said, you know, local authorities are to have a Māori ward, then they should have looked at the Local Electoral Act to see what in there would impact and impinge on councils not being able to put forward the ideal scenario for that council. And that to me is actually quite an error on the part of you know, the government. They should have made sure that whatever a community puts forward is actually what the community wants and should be able to receive. So I just want to say I do agree that this would have been the ideal model actually, and it's so sad that we cannot put it up.
No, I think Councillor Tapsell covered everything I want to say, and she did it much more eloquently than I could ever manage.
You make your point though, Councillor Bentley. It's great when you use it. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too agree with Councillor Rotorua Tate that I'm really sad, frustrated, angry that we cannot that we cannot implement this ideal representation model for Rotorua right now. I guess following on to Councillor McPherson's comment before about democracy and about our population, and what I would have to say about that is that our population changes, our community changes over time. Our Māori population now, through Stats NZ, is 40%, over 40%. Pacific peoples is 5.4 and Asian is 9.5. This wasn't the case years ago. It's completely changed. We've become a much more diverse community. And in fact, Rotorua, we also have a very young community as well that is even more diverse. And I can almost guarantee that this upcoming generation and the future generations will be even more diverse than we are currently. And so the decisions that we make today, not only does it have effect for this next election or the one after, but with those decisions, with the people that have the privilege to sit around this table and the decisions that we all make, it has those effects on all those future generations. I actually, being someone who is non-Māori, it's been a really, really tough time to make these decisions. And like Councillor Kumar mentioned, it feels very strange and it's put us in a very difficult position to be making decisions for Māori when we are not. And so that is why I actually personally feel like we've let down Māori because we can't pursue this ideal representation that not only puts voter parity, equal opportunity, but also focuses on equitable representation as well. And that's not through any fault of our own. It's through the Local Electoral Act. And I also wanted to acknowledge Mrs. Trumper and Mr. Thomas as well, the community boards. I've had the privilege of serving on the Rural Community Board, and I can tell you right now, Mrs. Trumper works so incredibly hard for the rural community. And I wanted to acknowledge the submissions as well that we'd received asking for a rural ward alongside a community board as well. I guess, through this whole conversation, no matter what decision that we make later on today on our representation. I just wanted to say, he rau ringa e oti ai, many hands make light work. E hara taku toa I te toa takitahi, e nāri ke he toa takitini. It takes a village to raise a child, and I think our child, in this case, is this 334 ideal representation model. And it takes a village, it takes a community to be successful, to work together, invite people to participate and to acknowledge the effort and work of the many. And I think later on, no matter which decision that we make, we may be divided in our opinion of how do we get there, but we have the same destination that we all want to reach. And with that, I do hope that with whatever decision that we make later on, that we join hands, or maybe join elbows because of COVID, but we join hands in working together to pursue these necessary reforms to keep up to date, to keep up with the times, to show that our community has changed and we are ready to fight for the future, because this is what we need to do. We need to come together and work for this collective goal that will adequately represent Rotorua and represent our diversity. Thank you.
The future of the district that we all hope to see and achieve. Thank you for that. Do you want a right of reply? Oh, Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through the Chair, keeping very short, don't know what comes first, the chicken or the egg or the chicken. But whatever happens is that whatever decision is being made, we probably hope that it's going to be more than 46% that represents the voting count, because Rotorua may still be very high in terms of the other numbers. Tamaki Makaurau, I think, sits at 42%, and at one stage was 39%, the biggest was it. So there's a real apathy when it goes to voting, and I don't know if this is going to make it any different for more people to vote. So.
Right, well, I'm going to put for a... Sorry, Mercy. Councillor Yates.
Kei te pai. Look, kei te hehea noi hoa hau, ki te mihi atu ki waku kai kaunihera I tēnei wā. And once again, just to acknowledge, yes, Councillor Wang, you are our future. You are speaking with our future's voice in mind. You know, my question all along, listening to everyone speak, was what would Rotorua look like? What is Rotorua going to look like in 50 years' time? And I think you surmised everything that encapsulates what's at forefront, kei te tihi o ngā whakaaro. And whilst, yes, even in this model, we're looking at 3 seats, we know that that still marginalises, if we're looking at a te tatau model, it still marginalises Māori. You know, ultimately, mana motuhake, when we think of self-determination, as Councillor Tapsell spoke about, it is 50-50. So this was really encouraging to listen to this, and I would still encourage us to be bold, demonstrate confidence, look at how we use this intel intelligently to move this model forward. I hope that it's not too far away, that we can actually start addressing this, and I still urge, as I did on Tuesday, Minister Mahuta to seriously consider what we look like here in Rotorua. Rotorua led the way with our partnership with Te Tatau o Te Arawa. We will lead the way when it comes to developing a model that suits us best, enables not only people at our table that are reflective of our community, enables Māori mana motuhake with Māori seats within the Māori ward, but it also provides 50-50 Māori and non-Māori the opportunity to vote for the same amount of people. So ka waiho tira, I runga I tēnei o a tātou nei mōtini I tēnei wā. Kia ora I te mārei kura.
I don't remember to turn on my mic. Can you hear me? I've got a really loud voice. Oh, sorry, for those recording. My apologies. So I'm going to put 4A and 4B. All those in favour, raise your hands. Against? Motion is carried. Now, would you like to take a 5-minute break before we actually go to 5? You would? Good. We'll have a 10-minute break. No. No, I'm meant to be conducting a funeral at 11 o'clock. I told them no. Reconvene, please, and there is not lunch today, so we'll reconvene. No. Very nice sushi over the road, or Vietnamese rolls down the road. Right, so we reconfigure at the right, reconvene. At the right time, and I was reminded by Una that if we don't turn on our microphones, it's not for the benefit of those in the gallery, it's for the recorded session. So that's whenever there's a transcript asked for, if we don't have our microphone on, that's where it looks like it's lost. You know, the conversation's lost or the debate's lost. So please, all of us, that me included, and also the live streaming for the public that want to watch and listen in. So thank you for reminding me, and I'll really endeavour to flick the switch. Right, we move now to 5, and I'll go back to you, Councillor Yates. And I think I'll read this because this is very important. There's some words in here, notwithstanding for above, which we've already indicated. We now, for the purposes, need to have a model. So, Councillor Yates, over to you.
So, kei te hoki ngā mahara ki te tūrei. So, on Tuesday, we voted on a model of 1 mayor elected at large, 1 Māori ward with 1 seat, 1 general seat with 1 seat, 8 at-large seats, a Rotorua Lakes Community Board, a rural community board. That has been publicly debated, but what I'd like to talk about here was it was the model that was provided to us by the local electoral commission as being one that had come through via the submissions, via the hearings, as being a model that constituted parity. I've heard discussions today around parity is not necessarily as favourable as democracy, but may I just say that parity in voters' choice is paramount for us. Whilst I also would like to note that while there is only 1 seat in this, which is not our ideal, both in a Māori and a general ward, that was the best opportunity to look at a 50-50 split on both those individual wards separately. When we look at an 8 at-large seat, we're talking about voters' opportunity to vote, irrespective of which role you sit on. So this model is the only opportunity where we actually get to see 50-50, whether you are Māori or non-Māori, having the opportunity to vote. And I say those words very clearly, Māori or non-Māori. This is not about a role per se. When we start breaking it up into the roles that people sit on, yes, disproportionately, our Māori role is smaller than the general role. But why should we marginalise Māori on the Māori role by only allowing them to have a certain proportion of votes to their counterparts on the non-Māori role? This if I was to refer to Councillor Kuma, is also that opportunity for the division to start creeping in. And it is sad that we have to come to this just to get a tick by the local electoral act. It's really, really destroying. It is soul destroying, in fact. And I used the other day emotional. I used the word emotional when we were looking at what does a Māori ward look like. Today, I'm going to use a different word. I'm going to use the words I used previously when describing Councillor Wang. I'm going to use a word of being bold, being courageous and being confident, because this is the only model that allows our Māori roll voters and general roll voters to vote for the same amount of people. Equity right there, fair and effective, keep it simple. This is the model. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. So for me, I would support this again, this model, as a stopgap. We've been here for 2 hours now discussing principles, and the majority of us have agreed to a set of principles about the appropriate electoral model for this community in the local government election of 2022. So in line with those principles, I would support this model. I like the analogy from one of our submitters in a letter to the paper today, is that here we are trying to reverse a trailer into a confined space for the first time. And that's what we're trying to achieve, and I think we do achieve with this. So it's about sticking to our principles. We hope this will be a stopgap measure until the Chief Executive carries out our earlier instruction. It's simpler, it's fairer, as my colleague Councillor Yates has just outlined, and I believe it will encourage greater voter participation. Certainly there's nothing like a robust debate to focus people on the election and a new electoral election model. But when it's as simple as you get the same number of votes, whichever role you're on, and it's pretty simple, you have one vote for whichever ward you are in, by whichever role you stand on, and the 8 at-large seats. I think that's very simple. It's elegantly simple, but it is only a stopgap measure, so I'll be in support, Your Worship. Thank you.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes, thank you. Whenever I read a motion like this, I always think, why are we revisiting, or why are we visiting this particular issue? Because it was, recall, it divided SPNF and got through by the Chair's casting vote. So it's not as clear-cut and straightforward as some of the speakers are presenting. And the great sources of resistance to it at the SPNF are the same that we've heard here today. So so I ask, why are we revisiting and being invited to relitigate this issue? Because we didn't get it right? No, I just think that it's time for those proponents of this motion and at the SPNF to be a little more respectful of the reasons why there is persistent objection from people.
I thought I had. Be more respectful. We're moving through at a very respectable and respectful pace.
Yes, look, I've withdrawn apologise, inappropriate word. Thank you. But you get the essence of what I'm feeling here, that this process, and if I could look more broadly at the process we've used this morning, what we've done is we've addressed a series of principles which are very important to the proponents of the co-governance political philosophy. And those slices that we've looked at, according to principles, have systematically marginalised democratic principles, as I've pointed out a number of times. This technique and philosophy is called salami slicing. It's a way of gradually adjusting a group so that they end up inevitably having to accept your conclusions.
Point of order, Councillor McPherson. We're not salami slicing here. We're talking about the future of Rotorua. Carry on.
I'll think about what you've just said, and perhaps I'll take the opportunity to speak again. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to? Councillor Rokawa Tate.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, of course, I will be voting for this at present, but I do want to thank Councillor Yates for actually taking the initiative and actually moving this motion this morning, this new motion this morning for us to think about, because all of the points that she's brought up actually, when I've listened to the discussion, then I think that there was an opportunity for all of us again to get clarity on what we're actually voting for today. So I have actually found that very, very helpful. And I'm sure those listening also from afar will find it helpful too. And they'll understand clearly that we've had to go with an option that was not our preferred model. So that's really good. And if we ever have an opportunity to further explain these things, then so be it. And we've had that opportunity again today. But we all know that New Zealand is changing. I mean, you just have to listen to Councillor Wang, a young and Councillor Tapsell and yourself, Councillor Yates, young people who are not content to look in the rear vision mirror, who are future focused and know that this is their future that they're creating, and for their children and their mokopuna, they're creating that future right now. So I thank you for your comments this morning, Councillor Wang. It was quite inspiring to listen to you, and by the reaction, I think most of the fellow councillors appreciated what you had to say. But no, this is the second best option. Our legal counsel said that to us, that we're actually having to go with the second best option. But go we should, because we know that hopefully within a short time we will be able to present to our community the desired model. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, this is something apparently we have to do. It is not the preferred, but it is still fits in with the preferred, the desired, the ideal. Te Arawa tātou would like to have had 50-50. Ngāti Whakaue, definitely 50-50. And you know, our council, I've said this often before, and I say it again, I'm very proud of our council. Before this term when we all got elected, 2019, for me for a long time, it's been difficult being the Lone Ranger on council for many years, but we're the most, I say we're unique, and we're the most diverse. 4 Māori, 4 Pākehā, 2 Chinese, 1 Indian. I mean that in a nice way, in a very respectful way, direct from there. But I'm also proud of my Scottish side and everything, but that's another whakapapa. But, and to me, I'm also going to hope that they do, whether it's the Commission or again, Nanai can bring things forward in a very fast way for the right reasons, bring forward our desired preferred. Respectfully, yes, the SPNF meeting the other day was on a casting vote, but I've been around the council here on many casting votes, and one, my tribe of Ngāti Rangiwewe, who filled the room up many years ago, 25 years ago or so. I didn't do a haka and go out when it went against our tribe, and thought just keep working at it. And Taniwha Springs, we now have a unique situation where we have a joint, We had our own protocol meeting the other day, and Ngāti Rangiwewe and Council were successful in putting forward a joint proposal for a consent, and we're waiting for COVID to die down a bit where we can celebrate more meaningful. But yes, this is what we need to do. I'll be voting for it. Thank you.
Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I spoke against this option at the SPNF meeting, and my view hasn't changed on that. As I said at the SPNF meeting, basically we had poor options and we were stuck by the electoral law. So we're pointing the finger at the law rather than each other in terms of trying to make a rational decision here today. So I know that we will have diverse views around this, but part of it's been brought about because the electoral law doesn't fit what we're trying to do. I just have a couple of comments. One is that I don't think this was an option that came through from consultation. It came through from lawyers' advice when we were looking for a solution. And whilst, yes, it may fit within the legislation and be legally compliant, it may not actually be what our community wants. We had really, really strong feedback from our Te Tatu Aotearoa partner. That is our partner that actually sits at this table, who are really, really strong about the fact that they wanted 3 guaranteed Māori seats in that ward. They weren't worried about the number of votes. They said, look, for us it's about equity restoration. Put our lens on it. We want guaranteed seats. Councillor Maxwell has just said he was a Lone Ranger before, because there's no guarantee next time round that there will be Māori representation that is on the general seats. So I think that, you know, whilst we've been urged to be bold and forward-thinking in terms of this decision, we also need to remember that we need to be bold and honour the commitments that we've made to our partners in this. We also need to remember that this is not a decision that is going to be enduring. There is the opportunity to have a further representation review in a few years' time. So really I'm urging councillors to say, what is the best interim decision that we can come to that meets all of the other criteria that we have been talking about? And for me, this model is complex in the fact that we end up with one councillor sitting in the general ward representing and doing the work of a councillor representing the whole of the district. We have the Māori ward single councillor representing all of Māori, so the 21,000 on the Māori roll, and then the other 8 councillors in the at-large seats representing around 9,000. So there's not that balance if you go back to the original principles of the Act in terms of the workload for the councillors and the representation of the community's needs by each individual councillor. I think it makes it more complex and confusing to voters, and yet we want to make it simple. We want to encourage people to actually get out and to be voting. We've said that we want fair and effective representation, but it's going to be difficult to match that up with currently what's up there, so I would be voting against that model. Thank you.
Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, trying to keep it very simple is not easy. And I think we've often been, lobbied by saying, be brave. Sometimes I think it's hard to be simple and hard to just not be bold and brave. And that doesn't undermine what the charactership is. I don't have a crystal ball. Even if we end up seeing equal suffrage over here and saying that we end up with 5 Maoris around the table, like I said, I don't have a crystal ball, but all I can understand is that even if we do end up with 5 Maoris, it is not that they're going to be all have lateral thinking. They will be representing different walks of life, different iwis, different tribes, and different communities. So their thinking will be completely, maybe different, and we don't know what it's going to be like. We live today and hope for a better future. And all I'm going to say is that I didn't support this model. I, from all my workshops, had a different model in mind. That wasn't going to be entertained because the common theme was something else. I actually wanted the status quo to remain, but that's not what we've got over here. So, in conclusion, I'm saying that as a father, when I have my 3 kids, I don't always have to be bold and be brave to make some decisions. I have to be sensible for what is going to be a better future for all my kids, not just one of them.
Wilson, Councillor.
Thank you for a second turn to speak, Your Worship. I just want to challenge a comment that was made about one Maori ward councillor representing a whole district of Maori and one at-large, one general councillor representing. When you come onto council, and I came on initially under the East Ward, you swear an oath to represent the entire district. You will have a lens as the Maori councillor who's elected to the Maori ward, if this goes through. You'll have a lens, the Maori lens, and it's a guaranteed seat for Maori on there. And the general candidate will have a general lens, but their duty is sworn to represent the entire district and the best interests of every citizen in the district. So I'll just make that point. Thank you, Worship.
And Councillor McPherson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. It's right. Many people have stressed today that the decision on representation basically determines the future of our local decision-making in our community. And it's not an accident that the Act actually requires not fair and effective decision-making, it requires democratic and effective decision-making, and there's been a consistent theme of trying to marginalise that set of ideas, which I think is unwise.
Point.
And if we take a long-term...
the use of the word marginalise, would you like to reconsider that?
The concept
this is
of democracy
in action.
Okay, fine, conceded. But I'm saying that the long-term view, a long-term view of the public interest, the key question to me is whether our moka's decision-making and their political identity and affiliations and so on, will that all be defined by their ethnicity or by their status as a citizen with equal rights and responsibilities? So, or is there going to be left open a possibility of both, that both can be represented? And at the moment, this motion before us, which we've seen before, does not enable both of those concepts to come through, in my view. The driver behind this, as I've said before, is a co-governance political philosophy. And the bottom line to me in this area is, and I've given expression to this in various forums, and as have RDRR and Grey Power, they just are very gently saying they will not accept the structure as citizens because they've not given their consent to be governed by unelected people. And if co-governance implies in any sense at all that there's going to be equal space given to people who are not elected directly by them, then it will continue to be unacceptable. So we come back to this, what's called often referred to as a mokopuna decision. I believe that we need to bequeath to our community and to the democratically... I'm sorry to interrupt your interruption. Yes, I'll go back to the beginning of that argument, the final argument. Why is this a mokopuna decision? My view is that we need to bequeath to our community and to the democratically elected council in 5 years' time, I trust, that we're democratically elected, they need to have the same rights and responsibilities that we've enjoyed to conduct this representation review. So for those reasons and the others that I've outlined, this remains unsupportable. Thank you.
Point of order, Your Worship, and it's a point of order around the use of unelected. I think that's misleading. No one elected under this model would be unelected. They would be elected. When I was first elected, it was by the voters in the East Ward. That didn't make me an unelected person for those in the South Ward or the West Ward or the North Ward.
That's a misinterpretation, misrepresentation in my view. I indicated before that if this philosophy, which runs through to the establishment of a co-governance structure, and before I pointed out the reality of the current co-governance structure with policy oversight, policy-making oversight, is unacceptable. So to interpret my comments in those terms, as you've just done, was misrepresentation. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you. Look, I want to first of all thank the elected members around the table for the robust discussion that we have had. I am sorry that at times we've been divided for no fault of our own, like colleagues have said, and I have remained open-minded right up until the end for this. And the decision that I'm making is based on my belief that first and foremost we are here to represent our community, and in order to make good decisions we must listen to our community. And one of our submitters, of the many submitters, one of them explained it so well when they said, and this was a non-Māori, and he said, you cannot give to Māori with one hand and take away with the other. And I'm saddened by the realities and the accuracy of that comment, that on one hand we gave Māori wards, but on the other we took away from their expectation to have 3 seats and now have a model on the table that only has 1. There's been a lot of complexities into making this decision, which include what will the council look like, what will the elected member, what will the candidates look like, but also what does that mean for voters. And when it comes down to my decision, it has to be what is the best option for our people, based on the principles that we've established before. And when we've had a clear message from our community, many came to us to speak for the first time. They submitted for the first time, and they said that it was because they felt so deeply that council were on the wrong path. Now, if we don't listen to that, then we are walking ourselves right into a disaster. I'm going to listen today to our community, to our Te Aroha partners, and I won't be supporting this because I actually support giving them 3 seats at this table, honouring the partnership, the principles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, but that relationship that we have with Te Tātou o Te Aroha. And I'm disappointed that the model that we could have is not what could have been best for Rotorua. And I believe that many in the community also agree that what we had before was perfectly fine. 10 councillors where they could vote for whoever they want. And now not only are people being discriminated on based on whether they're the Māori or general role, but now future councillors will also be divided based on whether they are Māori or non-Māori and what role or what seat they believe or the community may support them to go on. So in a time where there's lots of division in our community, I think we need to remember what's most important, and that's listening to the people who put us in these seats in the first place. So I won't be supporting this, and I would support any model that gives Māori the 3 seats that they've asked for. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
So I want to speak to that. Democracy's hard. Democracy is tough. We're elected, and we're elected to make decisions on behalf of the wider community. Marriage is hard, but you don't always get your way in a marriage. And today, Te Tātou clearly hasn't got their way about wanting 3 seats. But as long as we're making an iterative change for the better for our community, notwithstanding the principles that we all agreed to, fairness, that those on the Māori roll shouldn't be locked into a minority tick. We said yes to that. That is so unfair that my children can't vote equally with me on the general roll. That is grossly unfair, and I don't find that acceptable, and I was pleased to see we supported it. We also said that Rotorua should honour the township agreement, the Fenton agreement, and the Tiriti of Waitangi. And that's what we come with this interim model, because we can't do. That's democracy. We can't do what we all said we wanted to do. We reaffirmed that the preferred model is where we want to go. We all felt, well, the majority of us felt fine with that. You can't get it under the Electoral Act, and that instruction to change that is going to be very, very important for us. I listened. I think it's wrong to say that other members with a different view didn't listen to the community. I listened very carefully. And what I want for the future of Rotorua is a culturally diverse and a diverse council in terms of age, perspective, point of view. That's what we need to have. And in this model, that's exactly what we get. And it's not good enough for some who have been emphatic about what they want. But democracy is always about an iterative change. And the introduction of the Māori wards, I think, for New Zealand, for Aotearoa, that we care about, was a good thing. I agree with Councillor Rokawa Tate that we actually should have looked at the Electoral Act that would have helped us about which electoral role do you want to be on, and therefore exercise your vote. I listened and was absolutely convinced by Ngāti Whakaui. And Ngāti Whakaui, to me, underpins the Fenton Agreement. And that's why we're at this table. If Ngāti Whakaui hadn't gifted the land to become a township and the district it is today, we wouldn't be around this table. Who knows who would be here? And I can't forget that, because that is the principle that drives my decision. I want fairness, I want equity, and I want parity. And I've enjoyed the debate today. I've enjoyed hearing different views, because and society's about a different lens that we all have on life. I congratulate you, Councillor Yates, for putting the time in to actually structuring this very, very sensible, stepped-through process that allowed that debate today, that will overcome the mai of what we felt when we discussed this in our committee of council, and all thought, you've got to stay, if you're elected, stay at this table and make your vote, don't walk out. But we're trying to find our way through, and we're trying to navigate our way through, which is an iterative change. And I want to repeat that this is only a transition model. We've actually affirmed what we want. This is a transitional model until we can get that movement through government. And so we're leading the country yet again. And yes, you get divided and you get put into your little camps, and I've seen it since Tuesday. I haven't felt comfortable with the scurrying of members to sort of try to shore up each other. We're here to make collective decisions.
Point of order, there has been no scurrying of members.
All right.
There's been an independent vote from all of us.
Yeah, absolutely it is. But I haven't liked seeing the division, and there has been division. And I've felt the pain that some of you have felt with making this decision. So what you're doing, when we put 5, saying that this is an interim model that falls short of our preferred model, that's when we restore our mana with Te Tatou. That's how we restore our mana with the honouring of the Fenton Agreement. And I understand that issue of partnership and fairness and equity. And so this is about as good as it gets to actually demonstrate all of the discussion that I've heard today, and I've really learnt a lot from the discussion. I want to thank you, Una, and your team. This has been very, very hard. At times I know you felt threatened that this is a coercive process, and we've heard some of those words today. It hasn't been. It's been very fairly put at many of the workshops that we attended, where we did listen to the public, those that did go. So this is an interim model, very simply to me. It reaffirms the principle that we had at our first workshop. Keep it simple. This is simple. When elected, everybody around this table votes in the best interests of our wider community. So I'm certainly going to be in support of this, and the instruction will come very quickly to the Chief Executive to tidy up that Electoral Act. Right. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've really appreciated the debate that we've had this morning. You know, our respect for each other, no matter our views or division, you know, we all think independently. But with these two options, with this one and the fallback option on the table, to be honest, I am sceptical, and I view them with criticism. I don't 100% agree with either model, because, like we've discussed today, our ideal representational model is that 334, and that is what I absolutely support. But we're put into the position now where we have to make a very hard decision on how to balance voter parity, equal opportunity, and also equity. And these two options that we're left now both have its pros and cons, as with every option. But over the last few days, I have been consistently debating with myself and arguing with myself which options, the pros of each option and also the cons of each option. And the fact that we are going to what we've just voted on to instruct the Chief Executive to pursue those reforms, and again, we put into these positions, we sit around this table to make hard decisions for our community. But also with that fact that we are making a decision for our Māori community as well, how they will be represented. We've instructed the Chief Executive, with that last motion, to pursue those reforms. And honestly, I haven't made a decision up until right now. For us to pursue those reforms, to be talking that talk, I believe that we also need to be walking that walk as well. And that is why, begrudgingly, I'll be supporting 5A and 5B. Thank you.
Sorry, the last right of reply. You want to... Yes?
Kia ora to Fisher Wing, she. What I wanted to say was, it was a lovely comment also put forward earlier by Councillor Kuma, when he said, would be nice to be listening or hearing from Māori. Well, for the first time, this council have had 4 Māori on its on its council, first time ever this term. And you've heard from 3 people who are supporting it, and that's the rights. So there are 3 that are supporting it. So we're not only bringing forward the Māori view, we were elected for the whole council, for the whole community. And so whilst I still hear some saying they're supporting Te Aroa's tātou's view, but they don't represent Ngāti Whakaue's view. Te Aroa tātou. Ngāti Whakaue have said what we've been supporting all this morning, 50-50, although in their submission Te Aroa have said their preferred would be 50-50, but they don't have the confidence some of us have that we're going to work towards getting that. So I wanted to say that, and like you, Madam Mayor, it's been a very good debate this morning, and thank you for allowing me to speak again. Kia ora.
Now, Councillor Yates.
Tēnā koe through you, he te mārei kura. Ko tāku I te tuatahi me mihika tika ki a tātou katoa I tēnei ata, ahi nei. So just, I'd like to acknowledge each and every one of our councillors today. It has been with respect that each of us have provided and presented our authentic truth, the way in which the passion sometimes has to be subdued in order to get our point across. Kei te mōhio hau he uaua tēnei. Tuku wa mai ki a piri, tuku wa mai ki a tata. Koira ngā kōrero I puta mai tēnei ata. It was through bringing all of our conversations together, bringing it close together, that we've actually been able to work, albeit with different views, in a respectful way. Ka koro au I te rao ngā koro, tukua mai ki a piri. I'm reaching out to bring you close. Tukua mai ki a tata. I'm reaching out to bring you really close. Koiranga āhuatanga o tēnei o ngā watatou nei kaunihira. It's not going to be an easy vote on this one, I can already tell that. But I respect each and every one of you for bringing the passion to our table. I didn't get voted on to council to be popular in the community. I was voted on to council because our community believed that I would make a difference, that their votes would count. So ka waihonga koro ki kora, and I'll leave it up to you, Madam Mayor, to see how we deliberate from here on in.
Well, I'm going to put 5A and 5B. All those in favour, please raise their hands. Against? The vote is carried. And can I... 6-5. And could I say to all, if I just have a say first?
Oh, sorry, I just asked that the division be noted.
Yes, certainly. That's why you raised your hands. Yeah. Could I say thank you to you all for the respectful way in which we managed today, and I wanted everybody to have their say today. And democracy is the richer when we have diverse views and find a way on a pathway forward together. So thank you. And I do believe we should close our hui with a karakia today. Aye.
Kia tau anō, kia tātou katoa te ata whai o tō tātou e reki ai Ukraiti, te aroha o te atua me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu ai anei ke tonu atu, āmene. May the grace of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us now and evermore. Amen. Kia ora koutou.
At 12:05. Oh.
Did I tell you? My mum and dad made sure to get on to my family to vote for Reconvening.
Yeah, it's really good.
So, because, you know,